you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives, and cultures of the 13 vampiric legacies in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the Agents of Shadows, the Ramanga Xi Dundu. Much of the Ebony Kingdom is uninhabitable, for the kind and kindred alike. Arguably, kindred struggle the most, as there are very little safe places for them outside of settlements. This should not come to a surprise to you, for you know how Africa is filled with many stretches of long, large deserts that cast very little light during the night, engulfing those in some of the darkest environments found on our natural Earth. Notice, Neonate, that I was quite deliberate with my choice of wording. The darkness the Xi Dundu and the Ramanga before them is far more suffocating than anything that God himself provided for his cursed children. Yes, both breeds of Lireborn manipulate the shadows much like our own Lasombra do with obtenebration, arguably making them the most powerful of legacies to claim Africa their eternal domain. Although the Ramanga call obtenebration Izena. There are some differences between Western and African obtenebration, but we will get onto that later tonight, for I think it is best to start at the beginning, to help us understand a bit more about the Lasombra they are said to originate from, how they obtained such an ungodly power, and just how the turncoats found themselves so far south. With regards as to how the Lasombra obtained such a deadly power, one could speculate it coming from Cain directly, for he was banished to the darkness by God for murdering his brother Abel. The Lasombra don't view it like this though. They view it as removing the competition, which will act as a recurring theme throughout the lesson. The Ramanga and Xi Dundu have their theories, but I will explore them later tonight in greater detail. But beyond this, I cannot give you a definitive answer, neither can any other Cainite scholar I know of. The name of the second generation that embraced the Lasombra antediluvian has been lost to time, and I think many of the clan like that. After all, the second generation allowed their chowder to devour them, proving that they are a weak example to the rest of Cainites. The name of the antediluvian himself has also been lost to time, as are his early activities. But we do know that the antediluvian liked to go sailing. Now, this is no laughing matter. Some members of the clan would have portrayed him as a sea god, with many a Lasombra taking up the role of a pirate and ocean explorer thereafter. The Lasombra would claim territory around the Mediterranean, Greece, and the Italian peninsulas, whilst the other clans dominated the likes of Rome and Carthage. Sicily, where the antediluvian had his lair, would become the centre of the clan, from which they inserted themselves into various seafaring cultures that arose. Trade was a briskly fruitful time, as were the many trade and cargo ships that sailed and was raided across the Black Ocean. The Magisters would conceal their own ships in shadow, slaughtering and feasting upon any opposing ship at night. From this, it is fairly simple to assume that is how many Lasombra infiltrated the Ebony Kingdom, adopting the name of Ramanga and Xi Dundu as they embedded themselves within Lireborn culture and society. It is certainly well established that the Xi Dundu are very much a Lasombra bloodline. They share comparable attitudes and disciplines, dominate, obtenebration, and potence, in addition to sharing a similar but different clan weakness, in that the Xi Dundu do not cast a shadow, an important part of the soul in many African religions. Their name is taken from the Bavali word for shadow, who believe that when a person dies, the soul leaves through the mouth and can no longer cast a shadow. While some Xi Dundu assume this idea to be true, others would have you believe that this is some sort of divine retribution, while some extreme minds would insist that the earth rejects their touch. This, surprisingly enough, is probably the most likely of the theories I've just presented to you, as the Xi Dundu must not be by their native soil when they rest, lest they wish to feel weakened for 24 hours. The power-hungry Xi Dundu obviously do not want this, but this is a surprising contrast to the Tzimisce and Naglapa's need for their home soil. And that is not the only striking difference. If Dominate adds to the ill reputation of the Xi Dundu, Obtenebration is the fount in which it springs. Obtenebration, or Oblivion as some of the neonates refer to it these nights, is a very different beast in the Ebony Kingdom. Many Liabon assume the Xi Dundu to be soul thieves like the Nctulu Zawar, the Liabon Salubri bloodline, who do snatch souls, harnessing the powers of their dark magics. The Xi Dundu do not care too much about this rumour, but they know that this fear held over the rest of Liabon society gives them power. Simple but clever use of Obtenebration could be used by the Xi Dundu to circumvent their clan weakness. To an extent, this is very true, but the Xi Dundu quickly learn that there is more to their new shadow than initially expected. These shadows are artificial, ones that do not respond well to the light, and will make it very obvious that they do not like being near the light, dancing and wiggling around as if it were an arm of the Abyss or Ahriman, depending on who you ask. The Xi Dundu must fight to control their shadow, otherwise it will attack everything around it, including its creator, and will not stop unless either the shadow or the creator is destroyed. But what of the Ramanga? Do they have this problem with Obtenebration? Well, to be completely honest, I am not too sure. Given the fact the two are related in blood, I would have presumed that to be the case. The Ramanga I know certainly have a very different take on what Obtenebration is, the power in which they govern. Deep in the abyss lies a nameless, faceless horror. It spawned from the darkness before time, and survived against all odds through each rebirth of the universe. Its power was siphoned with every change, though until it was a mere shimmer of its former malevolence. The creature despaired, slowly sinking into lethargy, until a single mortal voice called out to it, Ramanga. It now rises again from the depths, and draws ever closer to the veil to seek escape. It will use the woman whose blood it cursed as a vessel, and remind the world what true darkness is. So in short, and to bastardize everything I've just told you, Western Obtenebration is the wielding of the Abyss in its entirety, rather than the Ramanga's and Xi Dundu's approach, which is they are chained to a creature deep within the Abyss. You look awfully confused, Neonate. Is it because I said the Xi Dundu and Ramanga are connected in more than just being wielders of the Abyss? Oh, I do apologize for not mentioning it sooner, or at the very least, not making it more obvious for you. The Xi Dundu and Ramanga are bloodlines of the La Sombra. That much is unanimous amongst canine scholars. What isn't as well known is that the Xi Dundu are descendant from the Ramanga, making them a bloodline of a bloodline, so to speak. To be more precise, the Xi Dundu are a rebranded Ramanga. Like many members of the Setite clan in the West would tell you that they are members of the Ministry, with mostly the Egyptian variants upholding the title of Follower of Set. So how did this happen? Well, the Ramanga were most prevalent during our Dark Ages, with the bloodline originating on an island off Africa's southeast coast, according to them at least. The story goes that on this island lived a woman by the name of Ramanga and her brother Rafasi. Ramanga, like the rest of her people, were descendants of the ancient Vazamba people and was patriarchal. She was the oldest child of a king. She was said to be smart and rather ambitious, and yet it was her brother Rafasi that was made the heir to the throne. You can probably see where this is going by now, but hold on, child, there is an interesting twist. Ramanga did not want to accept anything less than her destined birthright, to rule and command the willing lesser mortals, just like a true La Sombra. Anyway, Ramanga would then do what any sane, jealous, arduous individual would do, which is to make human sacrifices to the spirits of her people, presumably her Vazimba ancestors, to bribe them into spiritually and physically raising her above her younger brother. This would lead to no avail, so Ramanga would try again and gain favour from darker spirits, each one more malevolent and sinister than the last. Eventually, one answered her calls, offering her the power she desired, but only if she sacrificed the sun within her as payment. Of course she agreed, fueled only by the unfairness of her situation and the spiteful envy for Rafasi. The next 7 nights would be an eye-opening experience for Ramanga, as she was initiated into the spirit's legacy of illusions and shadows, demonstrating to her that true power came not from the giving orders of the lessers, but creating them. Outward power came from kings, but real power was found in the advisors. Remember that the next time when the prince asks her counsel or myself for advice. Ramanga would take these lessons to heart and would support her brother on the surface, but actually manipulated him into doing her bidding like the vampire she had become. She would cement her control over Rafasi and his children, directing the future of the kingdom. Vazimber would soon favour queens over kings. That was how great her influence was. Some say this was down to her mere presence instilling a sense of female rulership in the land, whilst others insist that the Ramanga was manipulating this outlook. The reality of which theory is true is probably found somewhere in the middle of both. Ramanga would soon seek more lands to control, whilst keeping her homeland off major naval routes so it would remain hers exclusively. You can find Ramanga presence mostly in the kingdoms of Ghana, Canaan, Constantinople, and the Middle East. Ramanga herself was, and presumably still is, actively involved with her lineage. At first glance, she seemed to have no end goal other than spreading and cementing her control over the continent, but they may well have been more to her bargain than merely sacrificing the sun. We will probably never know, as this is the only Ramanga tale. We have nothing else to currently go on. The Ramanga bloodline are much like their progenitor. They are a bloodline of subtle power, assuming the role of humble servant whilst controlling a monarch and their people to fulfill whatever purpose the puppeteer has. As such, the Ramanga has to be very careful as to who to embrace. The candidate has to be someone who is an ambitiously skilled manipulator who is smart enough to keep themselves out of the limelight. This can often mean that the Ramanga is invested in the manipulation of the mortal child from birth until they show the qualities the Ramanga is looking for. That being said, the avoiding of being centre stage is ignored when meeting Western Canaanites, should any of them visit. This encounter is naturally done in a natural, diplomatic fashion, avoiding physical confrontation where at all possible. Princes would view Ramanga as valuable allies or guides as a result. Just be aware that ally and guide are very vague terms for this sort of relationship. The same can also be said for the mortals that know and accept the Ramanga for what they are. Spiritual guides that can draw away bad omens to themselves and away from the people, acting as a loyal spiritual servant. This bad omen removing is often hidden in the kiss, the drinking of the mortal's blood, which means that it is rare for a Ramanga to physically go out of their main haven to hunt. I say main haven, for many puppeteers held two havens. The first is where their people can meet them and partake in the business dance with them and, on occasion, other Ramanga. The second haven is purely for them and their own safety during the day. They can also remain close to their sire for several centuries. No, I do not intend to keep you that long. Just you being here for several minutes repulses me greatly. Anyway, the Ramanga's need and possible desire to insert themselves into both mortal and kindred society as trusted advisors and mystics in order to get closer to their victims has a huge effect on the powers they wield and how they do so. This legacy possess obfuscate, presence, and izina, or obtenebration or oblivion in our terms. I am told that it is much more difficult for them to use izina on others than themselves unless they possess a physical piece of their victim, which I can presume is either a memento like a watch or piece of clothing, or an actual part of them, like a finger or a toe. Do not give me that look, child. You hold much weirder things on your mobile telephone, you freak. But let us return back to the Ramanga and not your weird fetishes. You can crudely view the Ramanga as what happens if the Setites were to make babies with every harpy. The internal collaboration between puppeteer and the court they govern makes any Ramanga a force to be reckoned with, and the Guruhi that naturally rules most of Africa know this. The Ramanga came into conflict with the Guruhi some 350 years ago at the time of this discussion. The Guru lineage did not permit the Ramanga for quite some time and drove them into the Kuba kingdom. This is where many of the Ramanga legacy became known as the Xi Dundu. Many of the lineage is still known by the name, whilst Eastern Liabon maintains the Ramanga name, not Xi Dundu. The Xi Dundu who do not remember their origins remember that there was a split of the legacy. One part that wanted to remain as they were, whilst the other wanted a greater power that is on the parallel with the antediluvians. Their rites backfired, leaving the Xi Dundu in agony, forcing them into the water, for the soil had rejected them, which is where the clan weakness mostly comes from. Eventually, they were able to return to the Ebony Kingdom via Tanzania. When they returned back on the soil, they became far more manipulative and open about their agenda to overthrow the Guruhi. The Xi Dundu choose the skilled and fearless to embrace in addition to those who want commanding and ruthless personalities for the embrace. manipulation is still just as important as before, so many a shadow is still a calculating politician who knows how to blend in. At the end of the night, it does not matter and what the mortal is. If they are strong of mind and can be useful in serving the Legacies' agenda, they will do just nicely. Of course, the use of dominated potents can only bend the wills and bones of people so far for the pure purpose of asserting dominance. The Xi Dundu use their network of allies and spies to spread the superstitious tales of terror and power, furthering their claims the night belonged to the Xi Dundu. The Legacy is a very strict and almost regimented one, where each Liabon within the Legacy demands loyalty to each other. Of course, that does not mean the Xi Dundu will not eliminate anyone within the Legacy who grows weak or just plain useless, but you can see why one as proud as the Xi Dundu would prefer to avoid such matters. A way that Xi Dundu have been known to test the strength of fledglings is by taking them out into the savannah and requesting them to kill a lion with their bare hands. If they were out there for some time, they would have to start thinking about making secure mud huts for protection. Otherwise, their domains are numerous but small. Most Xi Dundu are a close-knit bunch, hosting communal havens for other Xi Dundu and their retainers. A single Xi Dundu essentially nurses a flock of fledglings, have them fight against other Liabon who share the domain. It is as violent as you could imagine, child, and then some, and they do not make many friends with the other Legacies that way either. But you know the La Sombra and their offshoots well enough that they are not interested in making friends. The same can be said with most kindred actually, but that's beside the point. The Xi Dundu, like their La Sombra cousins, view themselves above the rest of Liabon society, which has made them very unpopular with the others, but they are willing to use the other Legacies to meet their own end. They respect the Akananse for their wisdom and experience, but hold a very low opinion on the Shango, for they are rightfully cautious of them. The Osebo and Kinyonyi are useful tools in the eyes of the shadows. The Osebo are easily swayed by strong personalities, whilst the Kinyonyi just don't ask questions when someone needs to be removed. They care not for the Ishtari. Then there is, of course, the hatred with the Guruhi. There is a proverb I once heard during my safari in years gone past, and it goes something like this: "When a lion grows old, even flies attack him." This is how the Xi Dundu and Ramanga view the Guruhi, and whilst both La Sombra bloodlines would loathe to bring themselves down to the level of a lowly fly that feasts off shit and putrid decay, they have been doing just that, biding their time, knowing their reign over the Ebony Kingdom is just around the corner. In short, the Xi Dundu, and many Ramanga for that matter, believe the kings are past their prime, but with a respect for the strong tenacity they hold onto their dying kingdom. The Xi Dundu and Ramanga, or as I like to call them, the Abyssal Legacies, know that without the Guruhi's presence, they would have fallen from their high throne quite a long time ago. Although, let us be honest for a moment. If the Guruhi didn't push back the Ramanga, I am fairly certain they would be the rulers of the Ebony Kingdom by now. The rebranding of the Ramanga has meant they have removed all attempts to hide their ambitions. The Xi Dundu want the limelight now, dare I say, they lust for it. They wish to rule the continent that they claim they had first, whilst the Ramanga know they are the ones with the real power, whispering their poison in the ears of any Magi willing to listen. The Xi Dundu and Ramanga are cruel and forthright, but they are natural masters of subversion, a talent passed down to and fro since the Dark Ages. Perhaps a change of leadership is needed. Perhaps this shadowy continent needs a shadowy faction to take up the mantle and steer the Ebony Kingdom into new and relevant directions, ones that could put Africa back on the map as a strong vampiric nation. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.